Morning, everyone, and it's great to see you all. This is a very important session that we're about to kick off with. It's all about digital transformation, which is a huge theme at this year's ADB Annual Meeting. We heard President Kanda speak about digital transformation at the opening. So this is what we are focused on. This is a session that will focus on the sustainable development angle. How do we achieve it? And to kick off, I'd like to introduce Antonio G. Zabalos. He's the Director for the Digital Sector Office from the ADB, to welcome you all. Antonio.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jared. So it's really an honor to be here sharing this session that it has been co-organized with our DG from IT, DG Stephanie, that is here as well. And let me start by saying that these days we have been hearing a lot about digital transformation. And I don't want digital transformation to be just a fashion, because digital transformation comes together with other interesting topics that we need to touch upon. One of them is, for instance, fraudemic. It's a combination of fraud and kind of pandemic that eventually we need to keep in mind how the digital risk should be put into the context, or simply digital poverty, which is a different type of poverty that we are facing today. So the panel that we have is very special, I would say, and it has been thoroughly thought. We have a regulator, we have telecom operators, mobile operators, we have a development agency, we have the institution that is precisely leading the standardization and the development of a particular policy worldwide. And of course, we have our financier, the ADB. So let me just, without further ado, introduce our VP of sectors and thematic areas, because that is going to be exactly the thing. Digital is not only a sector, but it's also a thematic area that has a great implication across the bank. Please welcome VP Fatima to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues, development partners, and guests. It is a privilege to welcome you to this session on digital transformation for sustainable development in Asia and the Pacific. We have just heard that digital transformation is no longer an option. It is an absolute necessary. We have a shared commitment to accelerating inclusive, green, and resilient development across the region. According to the World Economic Forum, across Asia and the Pacific, digital technologies present an opportunity to unlock up to $2 trillion in additional GDP by 2030. From transforming government services and enabling climate-smart agriculture to strengthening public financial management and broadening access to education and health, the digital revolution is a catalyst accelerating progress towards sustainable development goals. However, we face persistent and widening digital divide. Nearly 1.5 billion people in the region still lack internet connection. Besides internet access, digital literacy also remains a significant barrier, particularly for women, rural communities, and the elderly. These disparities not only hinder inclusive growth, but risk deepening existing inequalities. ADB is responding decisively. Earlier this year, ADB enhanced the Digital Sector Office to ensure a focused, strategic, and pragmatic approach to overcoming these challenges. We are covering a wide range of activities such as regulatory frameworks, cybersecurity laws, digital skills and infrastructure development, including with private sector participation and affordable access to all. In 2024 alone, ADB approved close to 2 billion in digital-related investments, including flagship initiative in e-government, digital health, smart logistics, and cybersecurity. Let me illustrate with a few examples. In Uzbekistan, we are supporting digital IT system to improve social protection. In Thailand, we are investing in a green data center to decarbonize digital infrastructure. In India and the Pacific Islands, we are enabling digital education platforms and ICT connectivity to bridge the rural-urban digital divide. And we are actively exploring future opportunities in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines. An important point to note is that digital transformation is not just about deploying technology and building infrastructure. Our upstream work on regulatory and institutional reforms helps in removing regulatory bottlenecks, promoting ethical data governance, paving the way for private sector investments, and fostering interoperability and regional cooperation. At the same time, we need to address growing risks such as cybersecurity threats, misuse of AI, and data monopolies that can undermine trust and stability. Today's session offers a valuable opportunity to reflect on progress, identify gaps, and explore how we can scale up what works. Let us draw lessons from innovators across the region who are demonstrating that digital transformation can be inclusive, secure, and sustainable. Above all, let us also reaffirm our shared ambition, a digitally empowered Asia and Pacific, where no one will left be behind. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. VP Fatima, VP Bruce, Antonio, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sulina Abdullah, and I have the honor and pleasure to introduce a video message from Ms. Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union, who's asked me to convey her best wishes to you. The ITU is the UN Specialized Agency for ICTs and Digital Technologies. This year, as we mark ITU's 160th anniversary and the 80th anniversary of the United Nations itself, we are reminded of the enduring power of international cooperation to drive progress. Today, as Fatima says, digital transformation is no longer a nice to have, but a must have for sustainable development. And it requires sustained investment, strong partnerships, and a shared commitment to leaving no one behind. Collaboration between institutions like the ADB and ITU are vital in shaping a more resilient and sustainable digital future here in the Asia-Pacific region, especially when it comes to enhancing infrastructure and shaping enabling policy and regulatory environments, whether through joint capacity building efforts, shared platforms like the Digital Infrastructure Investment Initiative, or avenues for knowledge exchange like ITU's Global Symposium for Regulators, there is tremendous potential to align our efforts across the region. As we look to the next 160 years, sessions like these help us to reflect on how we can build on ITU's legacy of facilitating cross-border cooperation to ensure that the benefits of digital reach everyone, everywhere. And let's hear from the ITU's Secretary General herself. Thank you.
Greetings from the International Telecommunication Union. It's a pleasure to join you as you explore digital transformation for sustainable development across Asia and the Pacific. As the UN Agency for Digital Technologies, ITU's mission is to bring meaningful connectivity and digital transformation to everyone, everywhere. But today, 1/3 of humanity, 2.6 billion people, remain offline. In the Asia-Pacific region, around 34% of the population still lacks internet access. That's millions of people excluded from the opportunities of digital, from education and healthcare to decent jobs and economic growth. At a time when the global digital economy is worth over $6 trillion, with 160 years of experience in connecting the world, we at the ITU know that connectivity starts with infrastructure. And that's why, together with key partners, including the ADB, ITU launched the Digital Infrastructure Investment Initiative. Our research shows that closing the physical infrastructure gap by 2030 will require at least $1.6 trillion in financing. But meaningful connectivity doesn't end with physical infrastructure like network cables, base stations, and data centers. We must also address demand-side challenges like digital skills, relevant local content, and affordability. And we need to leverage new approaches and emerging technologies to improve public services and accelerate digital development. Whether through digital public infrastructure, such as digital ID, payment systems, public registries that enable inclusion, interoperability and innovation, or through the thoughtful and responsible use of AI. Together, this lays the foundation for sustainable digital transformation. Making this a reality requires new models of collaboration. One example is Partner to Connect Digital Coalition, launched by the ITU in partnership with our UN sister agencies back in 2021. So far, Partner to Connect has mobilized over $73 billion to support digital transformation, with more than 300 pledges focused on Asia and the Pacific. ITU welcomes the opportunity to partner with ADB to help turn these pledges into collective action. The second example is GIGA, the ITU UNICEF initiative to bring every school online by 2030. But GIGA goes far beyond classroom connectivity. It shows the power of public-private partnership by bringing governments, telecom operators, infrastructure providers, tech firms, and development finance institutions all together to map, finance, and deliver connectivity that can unlock digital transformation across entire communities. Ladies and gentlemen, As your 58th annual meeting unfolds under the theme Sharing Experience, Building Tomorrow, I invite you to imagine the future that we can build together. By combining ADB's development finance expertise with ITU's technical know-how and global reach, we can unlock blended financing to de-risk investment in underserved areas. We can shape policy environments that attract capital while protecting inclusion. And we can create bold, new partnerships that deliver results. So let's seize this moment and strengthen our collaboration, because together we can build a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable digital future across Asia and the Pacific and beyond. Thank you.
How wonderful, and what a great message from the Secretary General of the ITU, and also a fantastic opening from all our speakers to talk about this very important panel that we're about to kick off. Now, I am so delighted to be leading this conversation because we know that digital technology is reshaping so much of what we do today, from AI to satellite geospatial technology to digital public infrastructure. These innovations are no longer future possibilities. They are the development tools of today. But the real question is, how do we make sure that these tools work for everyone fairly, responsibly, and sustainably? So that's the question I'm going to be putting to our powerhouse panel. So let's get right to it and introduce them. From a UNDP perspective, please welcome Kani Wignaraja, the UN Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific. Please join us on stage as I call your name. Thank you, Kani. For a global view from the telecom industry, we have Vivek Badrinath, the Director General of GSMA. Thank you, Vivek. For views on the regulatory framework, we have Verena Weber, Director of the Body of European Regulators for Electronic Communications. Verena, welcome. For a country-specific viewpoint, we have Abdul Malik Sadat Idris, the Deputy for Infrastructure's Ministry of National Development Planning from Bappenas, Indonesia. Terima kasih. And leading the charge right here at the ADB is Bruce Gosper, ADB's Vice President for Administration and Corporate Management, to share how ADB is embedding digital transformation into its DNA. Welcome to all of you. Please have a seat and we'll kick off. Now, Kani, I'll start with you. So please do share with us the UNDP's digital strategy and how it's taking shape, particularly in developing member countries.
Thank you. Maybe let me say we have three big areas of focus for a while now, but we just launched yesterday our new Human Development Report, which is on AI. And let me pick up the three big messages from there. One is the digital, how we're doing in the public sector and the public arena of digital. And here we see that a lot of attention is now focused on building out DPI, the public infrastructure, digital public infrastructure, and the digital registries and IDs and all of that. Where we are also focusing now is doing the same on the natural assets, because we find the valuation of natural assets, as we've been doing with human assets, so to speak, is critical, and really doing that as part of the first area. The second is digital in the industry and corporate and private sector space. And here, while the big players and the big financiers will obviously focus with private sector in large infrastructure development, for UNDP, the key is indeed what Fatima and others have referred to as who's getting left behind in this space. And I'll put one example to you. We work with 100,000 micro and small businesses in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan certainly today does not have a DPI. However, we've found that by working through these 100,000, 80,000 who are women-owned businesses, we've actually set up a significant digital infrastructure that works for them, both for e-commerce and for their financing and banking needs. And if we can do that in Afghanistan, I think we can do that anywhere. And the last point is digital for public values and building public trust. And here what we find is we're moving all our surveys of young people in Asia and the Pacific, and we have a large youth program that connects a lot of young people. We're finding that they're moving from what I would have called a pandemic era of anxiety to a social media era of anxiety, and really working in that public space, in regulation, building social trust, and really moving against a lot of that evil and corruption. We are the center of scam centers these days that are driven through a digital world. That is the third area of focus for UNDP.
Thank you so much, Kani. Now we move the conversation to Vivek. How does the regulatory framework affect the investment decisions of telcos? And what's next for telecom infrastructure as well, in terms of what's fair when it comes to big tech share?
Well, I think we're a foundational technology. So I think what Doreen mentioned in her address is central to what we're trying to achieve. We have 1.45 billion people using mobile internet in Asia. Trying to start with the glass half full. We've got 100 million people who don't have coverage, and that's indeed a matter for investment and for technology to go and bring them the access to mobile. But we've got 1.3 billion people who are not using it yet. So I think that's the first order of business. 1.3 billion people are within reach of mobile coverage, but they don't use the mobile internet. And I think addressing those gaps are what helps us to be indeed this foundational technology. And then, and that plays into regulation, the ability to bring down taxation for smartphone access, because one of the main reasons for for this usage gap is indeed the availability of low-cost handsets. And you see governments taking positive actions. South Africa, together with the World Bank and with GSMA, recently removed the luxury tax on smartphones below $100, which I think is the right approach. I mean, you might want to say that expensive smartphones are still to be subject to luxury tax when you compare them to other essential commodities, but recognizing now that mobility is part of the basics that open the door to access to digital health, to digital education, to government services, and bring that equality, that's something that needs to be addressed. So a lot of things to do on the regulatory side to enable private investment to serve its purpose, and then to bring digital to infrastructure projects of all sorts.
And that's perfect, because it's a great segue. Speaking of regulation, we know it can make or break the digital shift. So Verena, could you talk us through the importance of the need for smart and agile policy?
Of course. And so for those of you who are not that familiar with BEREC, so BEREC is the body of European regulators for communications. So it's basically all the European telecom and digital regulators together. And the main purpose is one, to ensure, a harmonized implementation of the European policy and regulatory framework across Europe. But the other important role of BEREC is to advise the European Commission when shaping its regulation, but also to advise European Parliament and Council. So now, to your question, and how should we or how can we foster investments in networks to have better connectivity, connect people, etc. So what we can see in BEREC is that a sound regulatory framework that provides investment certainty is really important. So basically that the rules of the games are clear, that they're not changing whenever there is a new election. So having like a stable, robust framework that companies can count on is for us very important. And that means, for example, having independent regulators that can take independent decision to basically make that happen. What we could also see in BEREC is that fostering competition goes a long way. So the evidence we have at BEREC is that whenever you foster competition in a country, that we can see that leads to strong investments and that also leads to innovation. So that's an important point. And it also, like a regulatory framework, like one that is agile, should also be one, that makes it easy to invest. So that means whenever we can, we should look at the regulatory framework to see, okay, how can we lower the administrative and regulatory burdens for operators to make it easy to invest. So the new EU Commission is looking into simplification these days. How can we simplify the European rules? And that is definitely an important point. And if I may, a final point on driving investments in mobile networks, because a lot of Asian countries are at the moment mainly connected through mobile. So while we think, that progress should be made also in fixed connectivity, because this is the most sustainable one, it's the fastest one that you can get. If you want to further expand mobile technology, which is important, you need to get spectrum policy and regulation right. So, you need to have a mechanism where you ensure an efficient allocation in spectrum, and the spectrum allocation should never have the aim to maximize public revenues. And I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Verena. Now, for a regional perspective that's more Asia-specific, I'm going to pass the mic now to Sulina Abdullah from ITU, just to add on to some of the conversation that we heard there from Verena from the European perspective. So, Sulina, over to you.
Okay, it is. Thanks, Sharanjit. I was going to ask for the floor later to share some figures, but let's start with internet use. Asia and the Pacific has caught up with the rest of the world. You're at 66% now of individuals using the internet versus 68% of the global average, which is good. And there are various reasons attributed to this, and that includes dynamic economies and growth in average incomes. But mainly, our research has shown, mainly it's due to policy and regulatory reforms, driven by the regional fora and their initiatives. Now it's ASEAN, it's APEC, it's the SAARC, SAARC, Asia-Pacific Telecommunity, the Pacific Islands Forum, and their partnerships with ADB, ITU, UNDP, GSMA, and all this has helped. Now, according to our latest analysis of policy and regulatory frameworks in Asia and the Pacific, there has already been steady progress in this area. Today, 1/4 of the 39 countries studied in this region have improved their rating to what we call Generation 4 regulation, with only 3 countries retaining Generation 1 status, and 2/3 remain at G2 and G3. However, assessments of the digital governance frameworks, what ITU calls Generation 5 regulation, in Asia and the Pacific, we lag behind the global average, but by only 6%. So there is room and time to catch up. Now, 2/3 of countries here in Asia at the limited or transitioning level, which is good, which means that, however, still lack a solid foundation for digital transformation. Now, 7 of the 19 countries in the world are from Asia and the Pacific, so that's really good. It's about 36, 37%. They are leading, and that includes Australia, India, Republic of Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, Philippines, and Singapore. There's a high level of adoption of national digital strategies here, 71% of countries having a national digital strategy, but this figure drops to just 48% for LDCs and SIDS in the region. So we cannot be complacent, and AI governance in particular is raising a lot of questions which we need to monitor closely and rapidly. Thank you, Sharanjit.
Thank you, Sulina. And you bring up so many relevant points there. We will be talking about those national digital strategies for countries specifically. And speaking of countries, let's look at Indonesia, because we know digital isn't just about devices and data. It's about solving real-world challenges. So let's hear from Abdul Malik Sadat Idris of Indonesia's Bappenas on how satellite-based solutions are solving some real problems for Indonesians on the ground.
Okay, thank you very much. I think if we divide the function, satellite is for Earth observation. We already tackle with the ADB help cooperation for the great earthquake of Palu. And then we help also to modernize our agriculture processes, palm oil production. So many things already implement. But in terms of the communication, actually the satellite also help. We are the first nation in the ASEAN to launch the satellite of communication. It helped to strengthen our infrastructure, to have access to the rural area, combining with our fiber optic and so on, something like that. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more about those national strategies. And now, finally, on to the ADB's Bruce. Do share with us how ADB is embedding digital transformation into its DNA. And as I mentioned, we had such a powerful opening from our speakers, but it was also something we heard from President Kanda the other day.
Indeed. Thanks, Sharonjit. And it's a great opportunity to be here today and to share this panel on this really important subject. So a short while ago, we looked at our Agenda 2030 and we made clear that digitalization is an important part of that. And I think that's fully reflected in what we hear from our governors, from the DMCs here at this annual meeting. It's a constant theme, expectations, desire for greater digitalization, the sorts of issues that many of our colleagues here have mentioned. It is a live, pressing, priority issue for all governments and businesses and citizens in the region. So for the bank, we're very much taken with this as an important opportunity to support this in ways that really improve the development impacts in the region. So we've done a lot of work in the bank ourselves. You talk about embedding digitalization in our DNA. So we've undertaken a very significant program of lifting the use of digital tools and technology, and that's involved some elements of AI over recent periods as well, to improve our capacity to actually move in a much more agile and faster way, a more impactful way that really leverages our information, our insight, our data in a way that can better assist us to assist our DMCs. So that's a separate story in a way, but let me talk a little bit about what we're doing with DMCs. I mean, first and foremost, there are digital elements in every project we undertake. If we look at energy or agriculture or health or education, each of those projects would have some level of digital expectation, and that will only grow, that will only increase. There's also, of course, a big appetite from government to do much better through e-governance, to improve systems for the way they regulate, for the way they provide services to consumers, for the way they organize information and access to information across economies. And that's an important opportunity for us to actually support in that area. And already a number of projects underway to help particular places. The Philippines, for instance, is one case in point. So all of that goes on day to day in the work we're doing. It's very much mainstreamed into the work we're doing. Connectivity is obviously an enormous demand in the region, and it has many aspects to it. It can be both simple, but it can be very complex and really require quite massive investments over an extended period of time if we're to see the sort of outcomes that we'd like to see. So that's going to be something that we'll have to see how it unfolds over a period of time. But we're quite engaged with ensuring that we do our part in that area, whether it's basic platforms for connectivity, whether it's the regulations that relate to that, whether it's data centers or many other things as well. One thing that we're quite conscious of is the relationship between entrepreneurship and the digital economy. access to digital assets, skills, applications and the like can be quite important for improving entrepreneurship and innovation in an economy, and we know that's an important driver of economic growth. So it's a particularly important, I think, where we're looking at micro and small enterprises. It has a particular dimension when we look at the place of women in an economy and their ability to find a place in the economy and to actually develop a higher standard of living and the like. Everyone's facing issues around cyber resilience and those sorts of issues. Everyone in the room here, so people who have good knowledge, good education, all the assets, you all face risks every day from the sophistication that criminal gangs and non-state actors and others are applying in this space. So you can imagine the challenges that many others face in getting basic levels of education and awareness, setting up appropriate regulatory frameworks, all those sorts of things. So we're quite conscious of that, and it's a pretty constant request from our DMCs for assistance in this particular space. And unfortunately, I think that's only going to continue to grow because of the amount of money that's at play here. There are big opportunities, and we've already touched on that a little bit around, better application and development of data for particular areas. I think the observation, the Earth observation data sets that we've demonstrated with one of our booths here, and we've talked about it over the past few days about how it can help with, for instance, in flood mitigation, in actually assessing the impact of particular levels of flood, predicting what might be in front of us and helping allow better preparedness and better planning. We will, unfortunately, that's going to be an even larger feature of the coming decades, the severity of climate events, and so our ability to actually respond to that and to be, where it's possible, to be ahead of it in a planning sense, I think will be particularly important. So there's lots of opportunities on that front that we're quite closely engaged in, of course. Digital inclusion, and again, that's already been mentioned as a particular subject. It's really important. If you look at the figures of the number of mobile devices around the planet, of course, there's more than the number of people, but of course there are big parts of populations which don't have connectivity, which don't have coverage, and that's a real problem because, as a colleague was observing earlier this morning, it's not a desirable. It's not something we should look at as something we can achieve at a particular stage. Individuals need access to devices and to digital connectivity early, particularly the poorest and most vulnerable, to actually develop a stake in life, to actually be able to save, to bank, to access services, to access information, to know when their crops should be planted, to know when there's a flood risk, all those sorts of things. It's not a desirable thing, it's an essential thing if people are to have sustainable, the ability to actually plant their feet and have a sustainable place and to actually grow and thrive. So it's a really important thing from that perspective. The challenges that we've talked about are quite massive. They're all encompassing. No one can do it by themselves, no one government, no one institution, not the public sector, not the private sector. It has to be an effort that involves all of us. And it's an area where partnerships can thrive and are thriving, and I think the panel is a demonstration of that. So for our part, we're certainly focused on public-private partnerships, for financing certainly, but also more broadly to how we actually bring more capability, more capacity to our DMCs.
Sure.
So it's a pretty big agenda, and maybe I should
It
leave
is huge,
at that before you cut me off.
It is such a good way to really look at the deep commitment that the ADB has towards digital transformation. And in case any of you are interested, a lot of this is also in the release of the Asian Development Policy Report, Digital Transformation for Good, which you should be able to download online, which also outlines the ADB's commitment and how it's working with many DMCs and member countries on specific challenges, much of which Bruce has mentioned there. At this point, we've heard from all our wonderful powerhouse panelists, but I'd also like to hear from you. So do ask your questions via Pigeonhole. If we can get the QR code to come up, we'd love to get your questions. I'm aiming to get those questions to our powerhouse panel towards the end of the session if we have time. And in the interest of time, we talked a little bit earlier about digital strategies, particularly for national levels, for countries specifically. Kani, you talked about it at your introduction. Tell us a little bit more about how crucial it is to have the right kind of digital strategy in place for many developing countries specifically. You know, this is something that is a real requirement, isn't it? We'll hear from you, and then I'll turn to Abdul Malik a little bit later.
Sure. Maybe let me focus our attention in on three kind of issues that we hit. Not an insurmountable wall, but certainly a wall when UNDP is working with a number of countries together with partners like ITU and ADB and others on digital strategy. The first, and I would say the challenge is to move from a digital strategy to actually an AI governance framework. A key issue is we're not moving fast enough as the dark side. If I call us the light side, the dark side is moving faster. And I'll just take two examples. We often now have to deal with and work with a civil war going on in Myanmar. And yet our teams are in there across the country. But there's a second civil war going on in Myanmar, and that is driven by the dark side of digital and AI. And we cannot even estimate right now the huge value of what is happening, not just through scam centers, but what is happening that undercuts everything going on in that country and now across the borders that are run purely on AI and digital platforms. And if you just put a money value on that, that could actually invest back in putting Myanmar back together again. A second issue there is we find the old traditional use of sanctions means nothing anymore, because the countries and the institutions that are going outside of sanctions regimes, you might as well forget sanctions. I mean, I'm being quite blunt here, but we see this including in our region. Now, Vivek spoke to using tax and other regulations to put a smartphone in everyone's hand. We did a recent survey on all the most disaster-prone, emergency-prone, climatic, that is, natural disaster situations in Asia and the Pacific. And when you ask these populations, what are the three things that are most important to you that you need to take with you to get out of a flood or an earthquake or an eruption? And it always now, it has shifted. It's children, my pets, and my phone. Now, I don't know where the spouse comes into that, but these three are the critical things, because having that phone in your hand saves your family and your life. So it is now a lifeline. It is not a luxury item anymore. And the last thing I would say here is that's why, on that front, to say, remember when we were asked 30 years ago, we were told, and now I'm going back to my country maybe, that developing countries should just focus on primary education. If you get all your kids into primary school, that's good enough. No, some countries said, I'm sorry, we are simultaneously going to invest in tertiary education. Those are the countries that have taken off in Asia and the Pacific, where others are lagging behind. The same with this infrastructure. This is not luxury infrastructure. And then my last point is looking inside. You know, the international community, if I might say, spends an excess amount and a huge carbon footprint with a lot of fly-in, fly-out expertise, a lot of reports and publications, UNDP included. I would say if all of us went in for public data and open systems, that would be a huge cost efficiency and a much more effective way of working today. So before our AI systems just take over and do all our jobs for us, if we can all commit to open data systems and open digital systems that are accessible to the public, then we've gone a long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Kani. Very, very succinctly put. Those are all crucial things, and the need for a strong digital strategy, as you say, really shows through in all of that. I'm going to move on to Abdul Malik now, because obviously a national plan is crucial. You have worked on one for Indonesia. So how do we move from ambition to action?
Thank you very much. I think in digital transformation, the speed is very fast, and always there is two sides of story. For instance, in our micro production on the textile, when there is AI, everybody copy each other work. That's a copyright. So one artist to produce a good fashion in Indonesia, they just upload it on the digital platform, copy it by China, and sell back again in e-commerce with much lower prices. So that's one area that government act to protect its people. And then how currently we have a problem little bit about it was introduced as the microfinance, but actually it's a loan shark system. So we fighting on that, but in the same time, digital transformation open a lot of opportunity in education, health sector, public service. But at the end, our strategy is to collaborate and to get vision for the domestic industries. For instance, to lower the cost, to increase the affordability of people. We start to jumpstart the micro electronic industries, because otherwise many equipment is just not affordable. And second, how to support the digital ecosystem, the envision, the ecosystem for software industries. We cannot just purchase everything, and some of the software actually it doesn't work well in Indonesian situation. So that community now is promoted and tailored to transform many sector. For instance, in the health sector, we modernize our hospital with the data record system, education, digital education. Government just relaunch again how to speed up the literacy on the digital and to make distance learning more efficient. Fortunately, we have a lot of content creators, so that help much the economy. Side gig is a job. So at the end, the digital strategy cannot be just one way from the government, but actually it's really to take closer look what is the change in each sector and keep up with the trend and prepare for the next wave of technology. For instance, in the satellite, we're considering how that the new generation satellite could help also our topography that is the land-based. So we cooperate with some donors, for instance, to really to transform that technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Indonesia, of course, Southeast Asia's largest economy, is really putting a value on that. It's not just about government policy, as you say, it's working with all the different stakeholders and private sector as well. Moving on to governance, though, this segues very nicely to Verena, because obviously what you pay very close attention to is governance. We're talking digital inclusion as well. So how do we design regulation that's really fast enough to keep up, but grounded enough to protect people? And protecting people is something we keep hearing about when it comes up to, you know, the cybersecurity issues and the multiple scams out there.
Well, thank you. And I think, like, basically, you know, any governance or regulatory framework should be measured against what you want to achieve, right? And so at the end of the day, like important policy goals in the digital areas, I mean, we do want to connect everyone and everything to high quality connectivity, right? So we want good coverage of networks. We want the availability of mobile devices, what was mentioned previously. But we also want that at an affordable price, right? Because otherwise we will leave like a lot of people out of the game, right? And before joining BEREC, I was also working 1 year in Colombia, where actually, you know, price was one of the issues keeping people out. We saw that in Mexico as well. So basically, in order to drive down the costs, we do see that obviously, and I'm repeating myself, but competition, you know, is an important lever, right? So if you have a country where you have monopolistic structures, at the end of the day, you won't get a good price. So any regulatory framework basically should look at, okay, how can we promote competition? Then Vivek already mentioned that, you know, like get rid of any luxury taxes that impedes people of having access. And then from my Colombian experience, like one key area is like if people understand how access to the internet helps them for their own small business, for their own life, basically they will do everything, you know, also to strive and getting access. So there were quite a lot of innovative programs where basically actually we're looking at, you know, how to drive demand, right? And so if you have like a lot of small enterprises in a country, all these small enterprises, even the mom and pop shops, they would interact with a bigger company, right? To basically either get their goods and services from them or sell their services, right? So one program that was quite smart in Colombia that actually worked is that program targeted like the bigger companies. And basically it was a public-private partnership, public-private partnership investment saying, okay, you bigger companies, develop easy programs where you can actually increase, you know, the productivity in how you work with these small companies. And actually that worked. And so when we had these small shops and they saw, okay, if we then use these programs that were sort of customized to their needs, they could see that they could easily increase their profits by 20%. So even like in areas where there were skills lacking, and obviously these programs also try to address that, but even when there were skills lacking, like the people found a way to teach themselves on how to use digital technology. So at the end of the day, like when people see how useful the technologies are, then they will adopt it. And this is something Vivek mentioned, right? In some areas we do have the coverage, but we don't have the uptake. Like even in Europe, we have actually that problem with fiber, right? Where people don't want to pay because they don't see the value. So, you know, given people to see the value goes a very long way then, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, you mentioned Vivek several times, so I'm going to turn to you, Vivek. We know that emerging technologies are actually accelerating at a much faster pace than policy. So how do technologies like 5G, satellite, internet, how do they accelerate digital inclusion? Because this really is pivotal, isn't it?
No, indeed. There's still, let's not forget, there's first of all about 270, just for the region, 270 billion to still invest to get to the right level of, I would say, service and capacity that really allows to bridge the digital inclusion gap, basically on traditional technologies, and that's something we're welcoming, and the private sector will do its job. I mean, with the right regulatory regime, with indeed, as you mentioned, a logical spectrum framework. Because there's always a saying, a dollar can only be spent once. Either you pay it for spectrum or you put it in these 270 billion of investment. And we'd rather put it in the 270 billion of investment to serve people. So that's the basic. It's about building programs that get the infrastructure out there, and that needs to be done. But indeed, the new technologies are also changing things, and I think we should not, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, saying, oh, let's just do mobile and then the rest will follow is a bit like saying just do primary education or tertiary, and I think that's a mistake, because the Asian economies have been mobile first in many cases, and in some cases have leapfrogged in terms of usage. There are certain geographies where mobile money leapfrogged the banking system for some time, even if everything moved on afterwards, partly. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So if you look at satellite, there's the satellite connectivity question. I think it was framed very well by Selina. The coverage part is not the biggest. The usage part is the biggest. And satellite really helps on coverage. I think there's some great progress on that. But it is a 4% problem, not a 45% problem. So I think we should just put it out there. It's important. It will help regions. It also helps when you have natural disasters in ways when the traditional or terrestrial infrastructure is damaged. So these are all good things for I would say, but it won't improve inclusion. It will improve resilience to a larger extent. I mean, it's not black or white, but it's much more a resilience question and an additional coverage question than it is an inclusion question. Now on AI, I think it's, you raised that point several times about it's innovation, agility versus governance. And I think the two go hand in hand. We've been working as an industry, both because we're a big user of AI for our systems, to make our systems work better, but also because we typically are on the path to usage of AI by our customers, to develop, I would say, trusted AI, ethical AI frameworks, and many of our operators are adopting them. It's a program that's been quite successful. Things around avoiding bias, things around the design, things around consent, privacy, and so on. At the same time, you can't slow down innovation, and I think there are lots of applications in a variety of subjects that none of us in this room could imagine today, or just today, but that will pop up over time. And so the Mobile for Development program on AI is a call for proposals, and we're funding projects this year. So any innovative project around AI for agri, AI for health, applications that innovators want to use, I think we need to progress those tests in parallel of putting in place a framework. And I think each one will reinforce the other.
Fantastic. Now, before I move on to Bruce and have a sense of how the ADB is trying to help solve many of these challenges that the rest of the panel have spoken about, particularly at the national level for developing countries, I thought I'd just follow up, Vivek, just the idea that obviously a lot of this requires money and investment. So tell us what is fair in terms of big tech's share.
Look, it's the traditional, there's been a big debate around fair share. Let me just put it, step back a bit. There's an investment gap. Take this region, 270 billion. That's going to have to come out of revenues. And operators need the regulatory framework, and we've addressed that several times, that allows them to deliver a sufficient return to support this investment. Our cooperation with ADB, I think there are areas where this will help. In putting in place some of these projects. Now, when you look at the whole chain, everybody's investing. full respect, people are putting data centers, people are putting undersea cables, but just to be clear, operators pay 85% of the bill. So that's why we are always saying fair share. We are investing. And the benefit is obviously dual. We are, I would say, we call it mutualism in biology. If there's no digital services, networks are useless. Why bother to put on to ask people to buy smartphones? Why put out networks if there's nothing to watch, nothing to read, nothing to share? On the other hand, no networks, no digital services. So I think I just would like to focus on fair. There is benefit, and hence there should be a shared effort to make sure that when we try to leave nobody behind, everybody chips in, because it's everybody's benefit that everybody chips in. So without making it into a big political debate between sectors, I think we're all on this together to reduce usage gap, change people's lives, get them infrastructure, get them services, and I think and that requires investment, and everybody needs to chip in.
Fantastic. And if we have any big tech in the room, please do pipe up at the end. We'd love to hear from you and your point of view as well. Now, let me move to Bruce, because you talked earlier about what the ADB is doing in terms of its digital strategy, helping developing countries. But how is the ADB also trying to deal with some of these challenges that we've heard the other panelists speak about, the issues around cybersecurity, data privacy, data localization as well is a big issue, and how do you manage that trust gap that is holding back progress?
Yes, thank you. So big question, but one we're faced with every day in as I said before, in the requests from our DMCs. So on cyber, of course, it happens at many levels. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of work that goes in the context of digital literacy, and just training people. I mean, the most sophisticated people, businesses and organizations train every year, multiple times, to just stop them doing obviously stupid things. So, it's something that we work on, all of us, all the time, but with people who are just coming into familiarity with digital skills and applications, it's a particularly important area. But I think governments are also interested in this in a broader context, how they can develop national cyber strategies, how they can have frameworks in place that really ensure that governance is done in a way that's sort of safe from all sorts of risks that are emerging. So this is particularly important. For us, of course, it also comes into view when you think about elements of infrastructure, power systems, airports, all these sorts of places, and the need for appropriate cyber defense systems to actually support that. So again, that's something that we're looking to support DMCs on. So there's a lot of activity across a broad range that's underway now, but I do think that some of the most important areas for us to focus on are these about ensuring that we're focusing on the poorest and most vulnerable, and so basic issues around digital literacy and inclusion. That's a really important focus for us. Then ensuring that we're providing training and that sort of work to allow in specific areas, might be agriculture, for instance, how to use digital skills to actually affect your lifestyle. And then helping governments take advantage of this sort of capability in a way that reflects a broad range of opportunities and challenges. If I can just add one element to it, and that is one of the other things that we are focused on now is regional cooperation and integration. So some of these issues, when we talk about data flows and those sorts of issues, it does go to the work we can do to support regional cooperation and integration around these issues. I mean, there's so much talk about data centers now. Everyone wants their own data center, or multiple. And in many cases, that makes perfect sense. But it's important that those sorts of desires and drives are also supported by the right sort of broader regulatory perspectives, where we do our best to ensure that standards are developed in a way that supports regional and global connections, that we have the opportunity to ensure that data can move smoothly. This is what is needed, I think, for economies to grow and to take advantage of what's around them. We need to be able to connect with markets, with capital, with data, globally. And that's the best environment for the region to actually flourish.
Thank you for that. Now, before I move on to Pigeonhole, and thank you all for your wonderful questions, there are quite a number of questions here. Does anybody else want to pick up on some of the points that have been brought up thus far, particularly when it comes to digital inclusion? Yes, Vivek, go ahead.
No, just a very small build in support of what VP Bruce just mentioned. I think it's in all sectors. If you take an energy project, if you take a healthcare project, if you take an agri project, it is not the most expensive part of it, but enabling it digitally actually can really drive adoption. We've seen a number of cases where just delivering that little education tool increases by double digit at the level of adoption. And thinking of it at the beginning of the project when you're designing it, looking at the digital enablement, is actually a very cost-efficient way of maximizing the return. So I think full support to that.
Thank you. Kani?
Maybe just to add a point on leapfrogging. It's interesting that for maybe too long in many of our countries, if you were a smallholder, a micro business, or a small farmer, the world of finance was microcredits, or and then moved to microfinance. Today, the world of insurance has opened up, which is so critical for small businesses and small farmers. And all of that, the way it works is on digital platforms. So, you can buy your insurance, and even here with the UNDP and Generali, now we do parametric insurance for small farmers in many of our large countries in Asia, and now we're introducing it in the Pacific. It's all on digital platforms. And previously we were told, no, insurance is far too advanced an industry for this. But it's brought it right to the door. So it's part of also the inclusion drive over and above maybe the resilience drive.
Absolutely, and it's democratized the process as well. Abdul Malik, do you want to add?
I think to increase the digital inclusion, as we know that digital is borderless, but actually how to make infusion work in the local industries, because otherwise any digital strategy then will not be sustainable on implementation. We can bring several technology, we bring new method, we do the pilot project, but if the local capacity industry is not fostered, I think it's just really market mechanism that will create another digital divide. For instance, in our metropolitan area, 30 million people live in Jabodetabek. I think it's more digital than some European cities. They implement many things. But we as the development communities, we need to really taking care of the basic. Thank you.
Absolutely, very good point. Obviously, the much more advanced cities get a lot more of that incredible, useful 5G coverage. Perhaps, the rural areas are not getting as much. So how do you spread out limited resources? I'm going to move to these questions now very quickly before I finally come back with a closer from everyone. And I know that, Kani, you've got a plane to catch, so I'm conscious of timing. So let's ask this question from the audience. Great question, which is all about digital infrastructure. It's had 3 votes, so thank you for that question. Digital infrastructure is crucial and should be considered critical national infrastructure. Can Vivek, Abdul Malik, or any of the others comment on security protections and redundancy policies and measures to ensure reliable performance? Vivek, do you want to take that? And Verena as well.
I'll start with that. Indeed, the definition of critical national infrastructure sometimes leads to regulatory decisions, and it's important to stay balanced in these matters. But it is essential when you have your medical systems running on digital infrastructures. Cybersecurity is essential, and indeed the protection against those threats is something that requires training. As an industry, we take that very seriously. We've got a number of security groups in, I would say, the more technical side of GSMA. We have work being done to share information, and I think that's one of the angles that we need to keep in mind on the fight against cyber threats. Cooperation is, there is no competitive advantage in being safer than the others when the risk is so big, in my view. So the operators share their incidents between themselves, and I think that whole cooperation between countries is essential, and it's a part of the resilience as well of mutual help.
Thank you. Verena, did you want to add?
Yeah, so I agree with Vivek on cybersecurity, which is a growing concern. But Europe is also more looking at like the physical resilience of networks. So basically, I mean, you need redundancy like in all stages, right? When you also think about network investments, right? So you need enough submarine routes. If one submarine is, you know, if there's an outage for one reason or another, whether deliberate or not. And you need in the backbone, you need enough redundancy, and then also in the local network, you need redundancy. So whenever thinking about a project, what is important to also have this physical resilience aspect in mind, just to think, okay, what networks are already out there? What do we need in addition? So this is one, and the other, what has to be thought in parallel is electricity, right? So I think there is more work to do in terms of when there is an electricity outage. So I mean, there was one in Spain recently, like the networks were running for another hour, and then they were all you know, going offline. So I mean, your safety net is the phone, right? But if you don't have the electricity, then the phone works for a couple of hours, and then you're cut off information. So also, like when thinking, you know, about strategic investment, basically thinking about like telecom plus electricity and how we can make this work. One member of BEREC is actually Ukraine. And they bumped up their regulation quite significantly, and I would say in terms of resilience, I mean, for unfortunate, very sad reasons now, I mean, they're one of the leaders in Europe because now, I mean, they work with the operators to keep the network up, you know, when there is an outage, and they manage to do that. So there are ways to do that. So let's think about it, because, you know, like whenever you have a natural disaster, whenever you have like a deliberate attack, resilience at the end of the day is key.
Okay.
Absolutely. Abdul Malik, very quickly.
Cybersecurity, I think, is part combination of cultural and encryption technology. But now everything will change. I think in the near future, every encryption now, I think, in the next 5 years will be broken. If with the newest technology, if not catch up. So what we can do is just at least strengthen the cultural approach. And in this cultural approach, most of the developing country concentrate on to form cyber task force, cyber agency. But actually, without a cultural approach to the society, I think it will be just mice and cat game. Is quite difficult for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Did anybody else want to add to that question before I move on to the next? Because there's another great question. Thank you. Atsushi Yamanaka-san always asks great questions. There's a question here. Since digital technologies evolve so fast and development partners cooperation scheme is too slow to catch up, do we need a whole new investment and cooperation mechanisms for digital for development cooperation? Thank you, Atsushi-san, for that question. Maybe you can take this, Bruce.
Well, I did talk about the work we've been doing internally to improve our processes. And maybe you don't see it quite yet at the level of projects, but we're making very significant investments to actually more effectively use our insights, our knowledge, our data, and doing it in much faster. So a big part of this, I think it's quite interesting, and it's a bit premature for me to talk about this, but AI, use of AI in-house is going to give us the possibility of achieving something quite remarkable. So to actually preserve our cost position, we're a very low-cost development agency, and to actually provide solutions very quickly and in a much more agile manner. So in effect, we're talking about a quite significant transformation of the way the bank works. It's not unusual. Many organizations are actually coming to the realization that digital transformation means that you actually change your whole model and how you work. And so for an institution like us, we can see that there's big opportunities, challenges as well, but big opportunities to be much more effective in the way we serve our clients. And we're very fully engaged on that now.
Wonderful. Do anybody else want to add to that? Development partners? Well, in that case, I will end with a final question. I will get a quick answer from each of you. I'll start with you, Kani, because I know you have to dash off. and perhaps we'll go down with the rest of the panel. So this is a question directed at all of you. Final thoughts. What can the ADB, other multilateral organizations or development institutions do to help member countries, developing countries, use digital tech for real development impact, especially as AI is entering the mainstream? So, Kani, do you want to have these final thoughts?
Well, in 1 minute, let me say that for me, after following this for a few decades now, it was devastating to see in yesterday's launch of the Human Development Report that the rate of progress of human development in our region has slowed to, the first time it has slowed down for 35 years. And this is not just a COVID effect. This is really post-COVID. We saw the slowdown happening before the pandemic, but it's not, the catch-up is not rapid enough. So for me, if an organization like UNDP or ADB or ITU can't actually put all of the power of AI and digital to work for human development, we're not doing our job. So the issue to me is not, at the end of the day, you should hold us to account for that end result. And we should hold governments, private sector, all towards that end result. If the entire world is heading down a slope of human development, what is all this innovation, tech, all this great stuff doing for people, the majority of people around the world?
Thank you. Great food for thought there. Vivek, your thoughts?
Yeah, two thoughts. One, I would say in the work with the countries, the recipient countries with which ADB works, promote, I would say, technology favorable policies that ensure that inclusion is taken into account. And in the projects, have a thought for the digital implementation and adoption, including with very simple tools that reach out to the individuals who could be beneficiaries very early on, because that's when it's the cheapest to implement, and it's not an afterthought. I would say those are the two. And certainly, as we are discussing between GSMA and ADB a cooperation document, we really look forward to continuing the support. It's a great partnership that we're counting on.
Fantastic. The conversation continues beyond this panel. Wonderful. Verena, your thoughts?
Thank you. So I think the creation of a digital sector within the ADB was a great step, because that means, and as Vivek was mentioning it as well, you can actually, have like a holistic strategy, to make sure, that, digital is always a part of the program, what Bruce mentioned as well. So because that will go a long way for all the different programs. And then the other point I would make, and I think Kani already mentioned it, like collaboration, like with other entities, BEREC is very evidence-based driven, so only what can be measured can be improved a bit. So, like collaboration when it comes to measurement, which is like, okay, do we achieve what we want to achieve? So, work with other institutions, to also have synergies, because at the end of the day, resources are limited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abdul Malik?
I hope ADB apply its blended financing or catalyst financing to accelerate this digital transformation, especially in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Kani mentioned ITU, so let's get a closing comment from Sulina as well, because the ITU is here.
Thank you. Actually, I want to leave you with some food for thought too. Now, if you're looking at adoption of digital technologies, let me just share. We are now in the fastest ever era of digital and technology transformation. It took 75 years for the telephone to be adopted by 75 million users. For the radio, it took 38 years. For the TV, 13, internet, 4. But for ChatGPT, 2 months, 100 million. Cyber security is a real thing. Every 39 seconds, approximately, there is an attack. And that increases by 80% year on year. So we need everything that you spoke about and what was said by my Secretary General. The PPPs have to extend also to policy and regulation. We have to all talk together to design the governance tools, all of us, because these tools have to be very tailored. It has to be bespoke. What you have for legal autonomous weapon systems cannot be used for precision agriculture. I mean, it's very different. So I think you've given us so much. Thank you for that, and I'm going to leave you here. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Sulina. And I guess, Bruce, you have the last word. What more can ADB do to help member countries in this huge challenge that we face?
Well, I think in responding to your question, I'd say 3 things. First of all, we need to be very human-centric. So focus on, we often talk in the organization about the girl child in Makassar, or you've heard our president more recently talking about the young school students he met recently in Cambodia. Focus on be human-centric and focus on the individual and helping lift them out of poverty and into a better standard of life. The second thing I'd say is for the organization, we have to fully embed a digital mindset in everything we do. It's not an add-on, it's not an additional thing, it's a core of every project that we do. And the third thing I'd say is we should be prepared to be innovative and experimental and to take risks in the sorts of projects that we support. Demonstration models and forging new applications and ways of using digital, I think, will be really important. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, we have covered so much ground here, from geospatial satellite technology to the fair share debate. And of course, the fundamental question really is, how do we connect people, all of those people, particularly in developing countries, without widening the gap, the inclusion gap? And so if there's one takeaway from this panel, it's really this: digital transformation isn't just about tech. It is about inclusion and thoughtful regulation and trust. Please give a big round of applause for our wonderful panelists. That was truly a great session. And thank you all. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you for those great questions as well. It's been a true privilege to moderate this.